Penn State adds its first player through the transfer portal. Former USC wide receiver Kiren Hudson is set to join the Nittany Lions for the 2025 season. And when it comes to wide receivers, Penn State should not stop there.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm your host of this live show, as this seems to be a common theme here with all the portal moves. We are talking now in addition to Penn State via the transfer portal. So Andy Kotelnicki returns, Drew Allar returns, and now this is another domino here. And funny enough, I talked about Kiren Hudson potentially being an addition for Penn State in an upcoming episode that I will have premiere tomorrow, but we're going to talk about this in real time. But the points still hold true here, is that this is a good addition, but I don't think it's enough for Penn State at this point. Penn State still needs to make other moves within the transfer portal to be able to build upon this, because Kiren Hudson, while it is a solid addition, there is upside and there are some positives to take away here. I still feel like Penn State is missing some things with the way that it's approaching the transfer portal here, particularly in terms of pass catchers, but we will talk about it, and please be a part of the conversation. This is a live show, so I'm looking for your comments, your questions, your reactions. Kiren Hudson from USC joining Penn State. 6'1" wide receiver, 205 is what he's listed at. Kiren Hudson, at least will be valuable. Penn State was going to have other suitors here, and to get Kiren Hudson first, and where we are in the transfer portal cycle, I mean, that is a win in itself. But I don't think they can just stop here and be content. No, they still need to add another wide receiver like an Eric Rivers. But let me talk about that later. Let's focus on the positives of Kiren Hudson. Why Penn State fans and why Drew Allar getting another solid pass catcher here? Because that's what he is. He might have flypaper for hands. This guy, according to Pro Football Focus, did not miss a catch, did not drop a pass in 2024. So he has hands made out of glue. He will catch just about anything you throw his way. But if I had to describe him, he is a possession receiver, meaning that he is your go-to guy on third down and 8, somebody that you can rely on to make a tough catch in traffic or a spectacular catch. Most people are posting his highlight now from that early game in the season, the first game of the season against LSU, and he had that spectacular one-handed grab. Yeah, did not register a dropped pass. And it's plays like that that really separate his game. But he is not necessarily a big play threat. I would say that, he's Mr. All Reliable, if you will. And with the size in Andy Kotelnicki's offense, he can be a blocker on the outside for Penn State and help in the run game. So for USC in 2024, always progressively got better here in 23, 17 catches, 189 yards, 2 touchdowns. Okay, nothing really to write home about. But in 2024, doubled that production, 38 catches, 462 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So I look at this, I look at Kiren Hudson, and this is actually something that I mentioned in, like I said, there will be a follow-up episode to talk about the transfer portal plans, and really my takes don't change based on this addition. Kiren Hudson, of the available receivers that Penn State was talking to, that they were in discussions with, this was one of my favorite players. I know that there are some drawbacks here because he's not the best available. I think On3 had him as a 3-star transfer, and that was either by their industry rankings or the actual On3 ranking itself in-house. He's not really rated that high. I would say that Penn State is getting value here, though, because I think he is being underrated in a sense. He's not that elite playmaker. Can he be a step up from, I guess, the average output at wide receiver for Penn State? Yes, this is a step up. Kiren Hudson's quote-unquote lack of production, if you will, if you're concerned that, he didn't produce enough. I mean, that was a crowded USC wide receiver room. I look at USC's stats from a season ago, and it was just a crowded timeshare between Makai Lemon, And all these guys that are pulled up. So he was the third leading wide receiver, and he was close. He was off about, give or take, 50 to 100 yards from being, and 10 receptions from being the lead receiver. So what happens when you increase his workload? Can he be that number one? I don't think he's an elite difference maker, but he certainly is a step up here. So USC throwing to Mekhi Lemon and Zachariah Branch. There was Jacoby Lane, who was that number one receiver truly in terms of talent. I think Jacoby Lane was the best receiver for USC overall. And Deuce Robinson, who, go figure, is also in the transfer portal. There were so many guys that USC had that Miller Moss and then Mayava were throwing to so many different options for the Trojans. But if you have Kiren Hudson and you give him a bulk of that workload, what can he do with it? This is obviously a benefit joining the team now or as soon as possible for winter workouts and spring football to get acclimated to the system, to build chemistry with Drew Allar. In the spring portal window, we will see what Penn State does. I don't think this is it. This certainly should not be it for Penn State's transfer portal plans. Like I said, they still have bigger fish to fry, not just at wide receiver, but at defensive line. So the transfer portal moves will not stop here and should not stop here. Let's talk about the negatives that I've kind of alluded to. So is he that top tier elite playmaker a la a KC Concepcion? They're definitely not in discussions with Eric Singleton Jr. I mean, that would be something if they did. These are just the names at the top of the industry rankings: Micah Hudson, Dane Key, Nick Anderson. So no, Kiren Hudson is not comparable to them. But I think if you add all of these quality playmakers and give Drew Allar, and that's what Penn State's going to have to go for here. It is concerning that they're losing out on the likes of a Concepcion. Never really have a chance here with Singleton Jr. or a Hudson, who immediately flipped from Texas Tech to Texas A&M. But I'm talking about the big names here, big players that for Penn State, they need to find a way to get these players that are going to add together. So focus on an Eric Singleton, excuse me, Eric Rivers, pardon me. Thinking Nicholas Singleton and Eric Rivers together. Eric Rivers, if you can add him, now you have two veteran playmakers together. So for Penn State, you're just going to have to go in terms of quantity as opposed to quality. So therefore, Penn State is moving in the right direction, but to miss out on the likes of those elite playmakers, those elite wide receivers, and being able to replicate that kind of production from Tyler Warren, it's going to be tough. But in this passing offense, that's how it's going to have to be. So we'll take a break here, take your comments, looking for your comments as well, your feedback, your questions, and talk more about Penn State's portal plans on the other side of this break. And today's episode is brought to you by the College Football Playoff. It is that time of year. The College Football Playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever. Bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you will love, TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff Kickoff Show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. Leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Today's live show is also brought to you by FanDuel. You can keep the action going in the NFL with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more. And it's all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And if we look over at FanDuel.com, you can see the lines for Penn State versus SMU. Penn State, surprised there's no line movement. It's been pretty static. Penn State is an 8.5-point favorite. The total is set at 53.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them over at FanDuel.com. And remember, you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's pick back up the conversation with your thoughts, your questions, your comments, your reactions. Kiren Hudson is a really good player and has potential to be wide receiver 1. I like Kiren Hudson. If he can get situated very early on, build some chemistry. Like I said, this is a step in the right direction. Of course, everybody's preference is going to be, disappointed to see that they couldn't get a Concepcion, that it is going to be a battle for the likes of an Eric Rivers. But if you can add, Penn State should not stop at Kiren Hudson. Penn State absolutely needs to, if Penn State can add Eric Rivers as well, and then you have multiple options here. So maybe it's not about just one overall elite playmaker. Maybe it's about what did USC do? They spread out the wealth. So Kiren Hudson was in that timeshare, but so you have Eric Rivers, and then you have Kiren Hudson, and then Trey Wallace, Tyser Denmark, right? The wide receiver depth can be really solid here. And maybe you don't necessarily need that overall superstar. It'd be nice, but you can't have everything you desire, right? Been doing a deep dive into basically every portal wide receiver, and this guy isn't a wide receiver 1. He struggles to create separation because of the lack of quickness, and the yards after catch just is not there. Decent blocker, though, which helps. I think the fair comparison, honestly, is Julian Fleming. So Kiren Hudson only has one year of eligibility left. He will be a redshirt senior. I know what everybody's going to say. Oh, Julian Fleming didn't light up the box scores. His stats were bad. What was the point of adding him in the portal? It's still a veteran. He's a smart wide receiver. He understands college football. And who's to say he can't get better? But there are definitely limitations here for Kiren Hudson. I agree in the fact that he is not a bona fide number 1 wide receiver. I think he needs other playmakers around him to succeed. And that's what I mean. It's a step up. It's a step in the right direction, but it's not the kind of playmaker that Penn State might have been looking for originally. Amazing how within 12 hours of Drew's announcement, we land a wide receiver. It's going to be really fun to see Andy Kotelnicki play with the downfield threats. And you still have Amari Evans. So Kiren Hudson isn't that downfield threat, if you will. He's a possession receiver. He's going to be a blocker on the outside, big physical target. And if you just give him a chance, he can catch in traffic. And I think that's where he separates himself, where he lacks in speed, the physicality, the toughness, the catch in traffic ability, all those things combined together to make him at least a solid addition. This is not a step backwards. We need to add a Hamler type to stretch the field and keep safeties busy. That's what Amari Evans is for. That's Amari Evans. Agreed, we are. To which point? But I like the we are. It sounds like another Fleming. If that's the case, they need to do better. Exactly my point. I don't think Penn State should not stop here. Eric Rivers is that make or break. If they miss out on him, does Penn State wait till the spring portal transfer window? You also don't want to alienate. So Eric Rivers is the receiver from Florida International. For anyone that's not familiar, this is more of your shifty slot receiver type. I don't know that I can directly compare him to a Jahan Dotson. I mean, he has a smaller type of build at 5'11", 180 pounds, give or take. Redshirt junior, another veteran here. But as we've seen in the past, Group of 5 receivers don't overly translate to the Big Ten. There's clearly a talent gap there. So it would be another solid addition, but it is not that, go back to the key word, difference maker. Not a true different, like a game changer, somebody that defenses really have to scheme for. Tyler Warren, right? Jahan Dotson, KJ Hamler, who we mentioned, even to an extent, Parker Washington. I feel like Parker Washington should be the measure at this point of where, because he wasn't elite, but he could have those moments where he took over games. And I don't see that from a Kiren Hudson, potentially an Eric Rivers. I see that from KC Concepcion, and he wasn't in Penn State was not in his top 6. Penn State, yes, Penn State made a move. Deontay Ross or Kendrick Law next, please. The more the merrier. I feel like you could almost insert really any name out of the transfer portal. I can go through this entire list because they were targeting a player like Reginald Virgil, for example, from Miami of Ohio, and then he committed to Texas Tech. Someone that Penn State was recruiting heavily as a tight end, Caleb Odom, entered the portal from Alabama, and it looks like at least it's either going to be Ole Miss or North Carolina, probably Ole Miss. That's at least the way On3 projects it. But he's converted from a tight end to a wide receiver, so why not? Why not? But anything helps. Honestly, anything helps. Is Hudson a better ad than Fleming was last year? Just trying to gauge the potential impact. Depends. It depends. They're very comparable to one another. I would say that this is Penn State clearly has a preference for what kind of wide receiver that they want to add in the portal in terms of characteristics. Again, a veteran. This is a one and done type of deal, kind of like Julian Fleming. He's going to help set the standard in terms of preparation, game knowledge, and I still feel like Penn State's wide receivers need that to an extent. You now have Trey Wallace, you still have Liam Clifford and Caden Saunders, but you still need to be able to set the example for eventually Peter Gonzalez and Josiah Brown when they are fully recovered from their respective injuries. But Tysier Denmark, that's kind of who everybody's waiting on. And Tysier Denmark, you don't want him to be the start. Well, you would like to have him be the starter, but I still feel like to an extent he's still developing. So if he's the starting wide receiver, that means he's ahead of schedule, which is fantastic news, but it might be too much pressure on him to expect, not on him personally, but it's too much pressure in general to expect him to go be, oh, he's the next Jahan Dotson. That's too much. That's too high of an expectation. Don't do that to Tysier. But he can be a breakout player down the stretch of the season. And I figured he was going to be somewhat of that going into the postseason here, late second half of the season. We still haven't seen that yet. And I'm honestly kind of surprised. So I don't know what happened there. Micah Hudson is overrated in my opinion. Are we? So I'm trying to figure out. Yes, yes, because there's Kiren Hudson, and then yes, I mentioned Micah Hudson, who transferred from Texas Tech. I mean, he's the number 3 overall receiver according to. I'm just listing off the top names because On3 has the ability to go through every single receiver and rank them accordingly. So I'm just looking at the top names and kind of reacting from there. But those are the best available, and Penn State's not in the conversation with them. Interestingly enough, when they need, I point to Tyler Warren's production. Because what is turning some of these wide receivers away from considering Penn State? Is it NIL? Is it because Penn State is more so committed to the ground game? Penn State's a run-first team and has been, even with Drew Allar. That is the preference, and that's Andy Kotelnicki's background. He's always been a run-first offensive coordinator. But you have this NFL-caliber quarterback, and you're losing that pass catcher in Tyler Warren. So the opportunities in the offense are completely wide open. What are they doing? What is Nicholas Singleton coming back, right? Penn State's going to have to change its identity a little bit, and they need a playmaker across the board. You can say, oh, well, they only develop tight ends and wide receivers can't go to Penn State because they don't succeed. Oh, Andy Kotelnicki will do whatever it takes to get the offense going. He said it. I think he said it in his most recent press conference today. If not, he said it before, that if there's a way to win with 10 offensive linemen, they will do it. It's not, oh, well, they can't use wide receivers, so why not? Penn State is making moves to be back-to-back champs. It's at least continuing to get the ball rolling. They are not finished. They are not finished because everything is pending. There are a lot of pending things to make them national title contenders again, because I think they're title contenders in 24. They can be in 25, but how do you offset the losses of KJ Winston, Jalen Reed? Eventually, Abdul Carter is going to declare for the NFL draft. What's going on with Denai Dennis Sutton? What's going on with Zane Durant, Kobe King, Zach Wheatley? I have continued to make the point, and I will when I talk about in the newest episode tomorrow, the transfer portal plans, both offensively and defensively. My points don't change even with the Kiren Hudson edition. I'm glad that of the available names that Penn State has been originally talking to, and I said, hey, I think Kiren Hudson is my favorite of the available names that they've spoken to, and go figure, that's the first one to commit. If you can add an Eric Rivers, this is a win overall for Penn State, because the transfer portal, it's early, but has not been going Penn State's way to an extent, and I think because they plan to make a push for in-house players, Singleton, Durant, Katron Allen, Kobe King, Zach Wheatley, Denai Sutton, all the guys that I've named. Why can't we get an A quality receiver? That goes back to my point. I think there's a variety of factors here. Penn State has been a run-first team. Mike Yurcich, Andy Kotelnicki, they are a run-first team. Wide receiver doesn't exist. So Penn State's viewed as tight end U. Part of it has to do with brand and, for what it's worth, right? Misconceptions, football stereotypes, if you will, that Penn State isn't seen. So that's why quarterbacks and wide receivers go to, I don't know, honestly, pick a school from the SEC where, but you notice how Penn State has no issues recruiting 3 tight ends into one class or 2 to 3 running backs in a class, because there's an understanding that you go to Penn State to develop as a running back and a tight end. Quarterback and wide receiver, that hasn't been the case. There hasn't been a high success rate for Penn State on offense there. So that's part of it. NIL too. NIL is competitive. If you want, forget quarterback. Penn State's got quarterback taken care of. That's obviously the highest premium. But wide receivers and defensive tackle, I would say those are the next expensive wide receiver, or the next 2 position groups that are the most expensive. If you want a KC Concepcion, get ready to pay at least $1 million to get that pass catcher. Is Penn State prepared to do that when you need to find a way to retain a Nicholas Singleton, a Denai Sutton, a Zane Durant, a Kobe King, a Zach Wheatley? Because that seems to be the plan moving forward. They have some contingencies because they don't want to go the route where they have to build a team, manufacture a team through the transfer portal. Crazy there aren't wide receivers lined up to play in playoff games with Allar as their quarterback in Kotelnicki's offense. It would have to do wonders for their NFL odds. Penn State is an upgrade almost over any other school. It's kind of perception at this point. Penn State fans, myself included, might see it differently. That, okay, Tyler Warren's leaving, so that opens it up just for a playmaker to join. But because Tyler Warren did that as a tight end, do you notice how Penn State got 3 tight end commitments in its class of 2025 and not 3 5-star wide receivers? Do you get my point? Is that you look at LSU, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson's playing football right now, right? Do you get what I'm saying? Is that Penn State doesn't have these issues with running back and tight end, but when it comes to wide receiver and quarterback, hopefully Drew Allar can change that. And then eventually, not Bo Pribula, Ethan Grunkemeyer, right? So these are the players that have to kind of set up the future, at least the next 5 years or so. But you notice that already. Okay, Drew Allar's starting to, by him performing the way he has over these past 2 seasons, now Penn State has an early commitment for the class of 2026 with Troy Hune. It's been a while since Penn State's had an elite playmaker at wide receiver, and you can really name them every so few years. Jahan Dotson, Chris Godwin, KJ Hamler. Factor in a little bit of Parker Washington, but that's kind of where the list ends. Allen Robinson's way too far back at this point for current wide receiver commits. When it comes to wide receivers, everybody's talking about Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, right? LSU wide receivers that have had plenty of success in their NFL careers. And that's why, even with Brian Kelly as the head coach, LSU is still viewed as that place for wide receivers to go and develop. Kiren Hudson has a lot better hands than Fleming. That very well might be true. I can't compare catching ability between Julian Fleming and Kiren Hudson. I will take your word for it. I would like to hope that the production from Hudson is better, but we won't know until he's there. He had that one-handed catch against LSU. Like I said, magnets for hands, flypaper hands. Kiren Hudson's biggest strength is his ability to catch. And I think that's where we will wrap things up. Like I said, I have an episode releasing tomorrow early about Penn State's transfer portal plans for both offense and defense. The addition of Kiren Hudson, it now is a little bit dated, but the points, the takes still hold up. And kind of the similar things that I've said here is that Penn State still needs to add more at the wide receiver position. Since they aren't getting that one elite playmaker, they're going to have to get a few good playmakers that are going to make a difference. Give Drew Allar a variety of weapons. Khalil Dinkins and Luke Reynolds, right, at tight end, and then Kiren Hudson. Hopefully they add in Eric Rivers, Trey Wallace, and I hope that doesn't displace anybody. We got to talk about the fact that Mari Evans is still in the fold. Liam Clifford is still in the fold. You don't want to alienate the current receivers that you have unless it's a significant step up. I don't know, but you don't want an overcrowded wide receiver room. And I think the spring transfer portal window is just going to be as important as the winter one is here. So thank you so much for checking out this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Appreciate your questions, comments, and feedback regarding Penn State's wide receiver situation. And it's going to be ongoing. This is not the final conversation we're going to have, nor will it be the last live reaction either. I'm pretty sure we're going to see some more surprise moves down the stretch here over the course of the offseason. My name is Zach Seyko. Thank you so much for joining this show. Please leave a like on this episode, share it with friends and family, and if you're not already, become an everydayer, subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams.